Okay, so today, this is the day before Thanksgiving in 2024, November 27th, Wednesday. And today we're going to have a pretty short and simple reading. We're going to go back to Acts and pick up the narrative where we left it off, from the time that Paul was in Corinth for a year and a half until his stint in Ephesus. And it's during his stay in Ephesus, which goes on for 2 or 3 years, that he writes the letters to the Corinthians. So we're going to start today in the Acts 18, verse 10, 11, 12 actually. And we're going to continue on through the middle half of chapter 19. So we only have about a chapter here to read today. And of course, as soon as I get started, here comes the cat. I guess she just hears the sound of my voice, and that just causes her to come out. She was sleeping back there in the bedroom and was out of my hair, but that just doesn't last. That just doesn't last. So Paul is in Corinth, and he's going to be there for some time. Jesus himself came to him in a vision. We'll go back and just read that. One night the Lord spoke to Paul in a vision. Do not be afraid. Keep on speaking and do not be silent. For I am with you, and no one is going to attack you and harm you, because I have many people in this city. So Paul stayed on for a year and a half, teaching them the word of God. And it was during that time, early in that time, that he wrote the letters to the Corinthians that we read. And now we're going to read through about his stay in Corinth and into Ephesus. While Gallio was proconsul of Achaia, that's the southern part of Greece, the Jews made a united attack on Paul and brought him to court. So I don't know when exactly this happened. I mean, we know in time that this happened around the year 51 AD, because we know that Gallio we found inscriptions dating him in our calendars, at least, to that year. I don't know if this was right away after Paul had gotten that vision from Jesus, or if this was sometime later. I guess sometime later. But anyway, eventually, Paul doesn't get peace forever. Eventually, the Jews go after him again. They made a united attack on Paul and brought him into court. This man, they charged, is persuading the people to worship God in ways contrary to the law. Now, we're not entirely clear on exactly what law this is. This is a Roman court, and Gallio is the person they're talking to, and he's a Roman. So it's probably not to do with their own Jewish law, or at least Gallio is going to say, I don't care about this. So they may be trying to say that he's instigating rebellion against Caesar, because he's preaching a king that's not Caesar and not because again, remember, the Jewish religion was exempted from the rules of having to follow the rest of the Roman Empire's standards of worship. So they, I guess, are going against that, but that's not how Gallio is going to perceive it. Just as Paul was about to speak, Gallio said to the Jews, if you Jews were making a complaint about some misdemeanor or serious crime, it would be reasonable for me to listen to you. But since it involves questions about words and names and your own law, settle the matter yourselves. They may not have been framing it that way, I don't know. But he took it that way. Whatever case they were trying to make about Paul breaking the law, Gallio took it as though this was all an inter-Jewish dispute. This is a matter that they needed to settle amongst themselves, and it had nothing to do with Roman political interests. This is actually a pretty big deal, because that essentially clears Christianity from the potential applications of having the law of Rome used against it. This is actually a pretty big deal, and I'm sure it's something that Luke, the writer of this book, would want Theophilus, his audience, probably a Roman official who's overlooking Paul's court case a few years later, probably something he wants him to know, that there has been a legal precedent established by Gallio, proconsul of Achaia, that this is entirely an inter-Jewish dispute and has no significance or should pose no threat or complication to the Roman law or the Roman political system. Excuse me. So settle your matter in yourselves. I will not be a judge of such things. So he had them ejected from the court. Then they all turned on Sosthenes, the synagogue ruler, and beat him in front of the court. My guess is that they were so... Sosthenes, who, by the way, is going to be listed with Paul as a co-author of 1 Corinthians. But I'm assuming it's the same guy. I'm assuming. My guess is that at this point in time, he is against Paul. He was a synagogue ruler. So my guess is that he was largely behind this push to get Paul brought to court. It failed, and so the rest of the Jews turned on him and beat him up because they were upset at his failure. That's my guess. It doesn't actually say that, but I don't see how it could be anything else. And that, in turn, I guess, would cause him to fall out of favor with them and eventually side with Paul, because he is listed as the co-author of 1 Corinthians along with Paul. I'm assuming it's the same dude. So he had them ejected, Gallio, had them ejected from the court. Then they all turned on Sosthenes, the synagogue ruler, and beat him in front of the court. But Gallio showed no concern whatsoever. He was not going to help this guy. This dude who's getting beaten up by this mob. Nope, not my business. Not my problem. Settle that within yourselves. Paul stayed on in Corinth for some time. 18 months, according to what we read previously. Or a year and a half. Then he left the brothers and sailed for Syria. That's north of Israel. So he's basically going back home to Antioch. Antioch has been his home church ever since Barnabas brought him there after he'd been in Tarsus for a while. And he's basically going back to Antioch, his host church. So he left the brothers and sailed for Syria, accompanied by Priscilla and Aquila. Before he sailed, he had his hair cut off at Cenchrea because of a vow he had taken. Don't know exactly what this means or what the significance of it is, but he took a vow and is cutting his hair. Normally, I don't know if this is a Nazirite vow or what this is exactly, and in the Nazirite vow we read about in Numbers 6, which wouldn't have been binding on Christians anymore, so I'm not sure if it is a Nazirite vow or if it is, why he's taking it. But he shaves his head, and the Nazirite vow says during the entire period of his vow he may not shave his head. No razor may be used. So my guess is that he's taking, if this is a Nazirite vow, my guess is he's taking this vow and he's not going to shave his head again until the time of his vow is completed, and then he might offer up his hair somewhere. But I don't know. Paul doesn't really talk about offering up vows like this in any of his letters. I don't know what this means exactly. They arrived at Ephesus. This is his first arrival at Ephesus, but he's not going to stay there yet, where Paul left Priscilla and Aquila. He himself went into the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. That's what he always does first, everywhere he goes. When they asked him to spend more time with them, he declined. But as he left, he promised, I will come back if it's God's will. And it will be God's will, because he will go back to Ephesus and will spend a significant chunk of time there. Then he set sail from Ephesus. When he landed at Caesarea, he went up, that's south of Judea, south of Jerusalem. He went up and greeted the church, and then went down to Antioch, presumably the church at Jerusalem. What he was doing there and how he managed to get there without getting arrested, don't know. Maybe he didn't actually go into Jerusalem and simply greeted the church, maybe outside the city somewhere. I don't know. But we don't have any more information about that than that. So then he went down to Antioch. So his second missionary journey is now over. We talk about the missionary journeys of Paul. This was the second one. The first one was back in Acts 13 and 14, and Barnabas was accompanying him. In fact, Barnabas was kind of the leader at that time. The second one happened, then they went to the Jerusalem Council in Acts 15. The second missionary journey happened after that, and Barnabas and he split company. And he had Silas with him, and he met Timothy, and eventually Luke. And when that covers the end of chapter Acts 15 all the way now to the middle of Acts 18. So that's his second missionary. Both of these journeys begin and end in Antioch in Syria. Now he's going to begin again. He has one more missionary journey to go through. This is what we call the third missionary journey. And depending on how you want to count it, some people count his trip to Rome as a fourth missionary journey, and that really isn't. But he does this missionary journey, then he goes to Rome. Of course, he's in custody at that time. He's a prisoner. And that's it. That's all we know about Paul's movements. My guess is that he was released from Rome and went on a fourth missionary journey later, about which the New Testament doesn't say much of anything, except for maybe some small hints here or there. Because Acts doesn't cover that period. Acts ends with him still in Rome. But my guess is that he was released from Rome. But we really don't know. But we know of these three missionary journeys he made, plus the trip to Rome. Now he's going to begin this third one. After spending some time in Antioch, don't know when or how long, Paul set out from there, so he's beginning his third missionary journey, apparently alone, and traveled from place to place throughout the region of Galatia and Phrygia, strengthening all the disciples. That's the area he first went to way back in his first missionary journey. That's the area that he wrote his letter to the Galatians to. He went there again on his beginning of his second missionary journey, so he's gone through that area now 3 times. He appears to be alone at this point. Silas, I guess, is still in Corinth. We never really read about Silas again. Timothy will still come and go with him a lot, but right now apparently Timothy is not with him, and Priscilla and Aquila are in Ephesus. Luke is still in Philippi. Luke is still in Philippi. So I guess Paul's alone at this point, I guess. I'm going to go ahead and stop this video here.